Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but we want to give a shout out to our partners, the global community of women in high school sports, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, We Coach, and the Florida Coaches Coalition. You've heard me say many times that these are four great organizations. You should really add them to your network. And now, don't hit that fast forward button. Stay with us for the next 3 minutes. We're going to give our sponsors a shout out. These are all companies that I used as a coach or as an athletic director. You should be using them too. Here we go. We want to thank Huddle for their support of the podcast. Go to huddle.com, change the way that you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that helped them coach our kids up to their highest level. At Huddle, we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com. Start creating world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. You can do it in seconds on any device. It's so easy, even I can do it. Promote your athletes, celebrate your team's accomplishments. Go to Gipper.com. Start creating world-class content for your school's social media channel. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges, and they offer more support, more security, more customization. Hometown is going to be the best online ticketing solution for you. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Home Campus. Go to homecampus.com, which is the exclusive high school and state association management platform for the podcast. It's also your one-stop for scheduling, student-athlete eligibility and clearance, and a whole lot more. As a high school AD, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just fantastic. Go to homecampus.com to find out more information. We also want to say thanks to Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you do your job better. If you're looking for a fundraiser, stop right here. SnapRaise is hands down the best one available. But there's Snap Store, Snap Connect, Snap Manage, and a whole lot more. You can find it all at snapraise.com. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or your school's Hall of Fame, or just tell more compelling stories, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their great products, and when you're ready to order, mention the podcast. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule a live web demo, and see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. You can find out more by going to sidelineinteractive.com. That's sidelineinteractive.com. And we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that allows you to take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, the 2% that want to gripe about everything. Athletic Surveys connects you with that 2%, but they also connect you with the 98% that love and support your program. That's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent, your principal, or your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com to get started. athleticsurveys.com. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to Michigan today, and we're going to be talking with Molly Moore. Molly has just a tremendous background in our profession. You know, she was an athlete. She was a coach at the college level, a head coach. She's also a college athletic director, and she's done a lot of other really cool things that she's going to talk about. She is currently the Director of Donor Relations at Oakland University, and that's in Michigan. Molly Moore, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you and I connected on Twitter. That's another thing I'll mention. Molly has a very strong Twitter game. So try to follow her on Twitter. But as we were getting to know each other, I guess, online, I just felt that you'd be a great guest for our listeners, most of whom are high school and a few college athletic directors. But we always like to get started by letting our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up, maybe take us through your own high school and college days. Then we'll take our first break. But what's the Molly Moore origin story?
I wish it was more exciting than it actually is. But I grew up and I actually still live in the South Detroit area. So I think the area that a lot of people know from the Journey song. We're just below Detroit, but above Ohio. Not really a big town, but born and raised, third generation at my high school that I attended. So we're really active in the community and in the culture at the school. But I'm one of three kids. We were always a very athletic family growing up. My parents embraced all of the things that I wanted to do as a kid. And as a result, as a younger kid, played softball, basketball, volleyball, all that stuff. And in high school, really found that basketball was my favorite sport. And that's sort of what I intended to pursue and wanted to do more with down the line. Ended up having some knee problems and surgeries. And so actually after, and most people that know me know this, but a lot of people don't, kind of gave up the playing career after that, and never played in college because of the knees, and got into coaching really at that point, because I think, as you know, when you're involved in sports, you have it in your blood. In one way or another, you're going to be out there on the field or on the court. And so I really decided that coaching was the way that I was going to do that. And I started through college with another friend of mine that had played basketball with me in high school and kind of was on the same path collegiately. We started coaching back at our high school and loved it. And from there, I graduated from a small D3 school. And before I graduated, actually was hired as a teacher and coach back at the high school that I had attended. And so I went back there as an English and health and physical education teacher, and was coaching basketball at the time with the coach who was my varsity coach when I was there. So everything kind of came full circle, and loved my time there. Never really intended to do anything else in life except be a high school teacher and a coach. And about, a couple years into it, interestingly, I have a sister who's 8 years younger than I am. And she was in school there when I was teaching and coaching. And she was a softball player. And her coach approached me one time and said, "Hey, I like what you're doing with the basketball program, Do you want to come and coach softball?" And it really, at the time, wasn't my jam. I didn't know what I had to offer, but I always opened for a challenge and an opportunity. And I was, young 20s at the time. So little dumb, I guess, and said, sure. And so I followed him around for literally days with a notebook. And that was like the beginning of my love affair with softball and my coaching career with softball. So I did that for a couple of years at the high school. And one day out of the blue, I got a call from one of the coaches at the college that I had attended. And this is now 3 years into my high school teaching and coaching career. And he was the baseball coach. And he said, "Hey, we have this job opening for an assistant athletic director to be in charge of women's athletics and to be an assistant soccer coach and assistant softball coach. And by the way, you need to be able to teach freshman level exercise science classes. Are you interested?" And it was kind of mind-boggling at the time, because I wasn't sure why I got the call and what it was that they believed I could bring to the table. But I had also just been given my contract for the next year and at the high school, and was offered $19,000 as a salary that year. And so it's interesting, as much as I loved my time, you still want to look at opportunities that allow you to make some money. And so I said, sure, I'll come out and talk. And so I went out on a Friday, and as I was driving back home, they called and offered me this job. So without much hesitation, I viewed it as a really great opportunity. I felt very blessed that with not a whole lot of experience under my belt, they provided that opportunity for me. So I took off and packed up and moved back a little bit west from where I grew up, and spent 10 years there then at that college as a coach. I was an assistant coach for a couple of years with soccer and softball. And then actually, no, 1 year, and then was elevated to head coach when the head coach departed, and had 10 really, really great years there. That institution went through a lot of change when I was there. They were really struggling with enrollment at the beginning, and a new president came in and sort of changed how everything operated, and they're thriving now. And interestingly, my oldest son is attending that school as well. So it's kind of cool to see how the school that I was part of back, so many years ago now is thriving, and my son will be graduating with a degree from there in the spring. So it's cool. All of this to say, I was really blessed with a lot of people who believed in me and provided me opportunities. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And, looking back, the wisdom that comes with age and experience, I think back to some of those first few years and don't really know how I survived. I feel like I wasn't really sure, what I was doing and things like that, but it's part of the game. And I think no matter how old you are or what your experience level is, when you are provided a new opportunity and a new challenge, you embrace it and you do the best you can, and you learn along the way. So it was a big deal for me, and in kind of creating the person that I am today too.
Yeah, no doubt. That expression, "you don't know what you don't know." I'm sure that was maybe didn't go through your mind, but you were experiencing that. Talk just a little bit before we take our break. You're no longer, coaching. You're no longer an athletic director, but you're still in education, at the college level. What are some things that you remember from your time, maybe as that young college coach, that young college administrator, or we'll say younger because you're still pretty young. What were some experiences that maybe at the moment you didn't realize them, but now looking back, those were some, significant moments in your life that still impact you today as the director of donor relations?
Oh, wow. Well, there's a couple of things. And quickly, my path changed from coaching to fundraising relatively quickly and relatively easily, and sort of unexpectedly. And there's a little bit more background to that, but part of it was because I was being a mom, and recruiting and being on the road all the time was really difficult with 3 children, and so it was a family move that I made at the time, and one that I didn't really. I always expected to be involved in athletics, but the opportunity that presented itself to me when I needed to make the change was one of moving into a community relations and fundraising position at our local hospital. And the first thing I asked, again, it was somebody that I had known who said, "Hey, I know you're looking to move back and so on and so forth. Would you be interested in this?" I said, "Well, I don't have any background in fundraising. I don't know what I can bring to the table." And they said, "But you really do, because you recruit for a living, and you're selling an intangible experience essentially to student athletes and to their families. It's the exact same process as fundraising." And for the first time, I thought, oh my gosh, it really is. And so my takeaway from all of that and all of the years of recruiting and everything is that the process is pretty much the same. And at the end of the day, it's all about building relationships and connecting with people and being able to have conversations and communicate meaningfully. And so whether you're fundraising or coaching or recruiting and building a program, it all comes down to your ability to build relationships, genuine relationships with people. And that was the biggest takeaway. That was my, the one thing that translated over most for me.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think any of our listeners, would agree 100%, building those relationships, whether it's as a coach, as an AD, as a director of development, as a college president, you got to have that ability to relate to others. For listeners, our guest today is Molly Moore, a longtime college coach and administrator, now the director of donor relations at Oakland University. That's in Michigan. We're going to take our first break, but we're coming back with more. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to our friends at Huddle for their support of the podcast. Huddle is going to change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed them to coach our kids and our teams at their highest level. Go to huddle.com and you're going to find a professional grade solution to the challenges that all athletic directors face. At Huddle, we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join this 8 million users and find out how to turn your school into a Huddle school. That's huddle.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest is Molly Moore. She's a longtime coach, college AD, and now she's the director of donor relations at Oakland University. Molly, you talked a little bit about how your coaching career and your career as a college administrator led to some fundraising positions and now on to your current position. You and I talked during the break. Athletic directors and coaches are always out there fundraising in one way or another, small or big. Can you talk about, and you alluded to it in the last segment, can you just talk about some of the things that, I'll use a phrase, that were in your toolbox that allowed you to experience success, and maybe some things that ADs that are listening can incorporate to help them in their fundraising or branding efforts?
Certainly. And it's actually a good question because I do work with our athletics department on some of their bigger fundraising efforts. And we do have one right now that's $1 million campaign where we're looking to name one of our facilities after a recently retired and very well-loved coach. And so I've had some really interesting conversation with our athletic director and some of the other stakeholders involved in that process. And they always tell me the same thing. They're like, I can run an athletic program and I can support our teams and our coaches. I don't want to ask people for money and I don't know how to ask people for money. So help, how do we do this? And I keep coming back to what I said in the last segment, which is if you can recruit, you can raise money. And so to say that I can't, I don't know how is sort of an excuse. I think it's more that they're uncomfortable doing it.
Absolutely.
It's difficult to ask people for money. And I think in 2023, given some of the things that we've been faced with, it's maybe a little bit more difficult and more uncomfortable because, there's people that have a lot of challenges and things that make it, I don't know, make you feel bad sometimes if you don't know how to do it and you don't have the support to do it. And I'll be very honest. At one point a few years ago, I was done because it's a difficult job. But at the end of the day, my suggestion to any of those folks fundraising is if you believe in what it is you are fundraising for, the rest of it should be pretty easy. And certainly there's nuances to how to go for a big ask, in particular, if you need to build a facility or a stadium or so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, if you're passionate about what you're doing and you are understanding of the need to raise money for what you're doing, if it's supporting your programs or, again, building a facility or upgrading or whatever, then man, if you've got that in your back pocket, the rest of it should be easy because you're genuinely looking to get people on board with what you're doing. But all of that too, you have to understand that as an AD or as a coach, you're not going that route alone. And I think if you're able to get investment, and I don't mean like a financial investment, but the investment of the people within your program, whether it's your coaches or your players or your parents and so on and so forth, get them on your team and help them to advocate and help them to support your effort. It makes it a little bit easier. There's really there's no magic formula for doing it. But again, it comes down to people and how are you leveraging your people and your resources to help you get to whatever it is you need to get to. I'll throw out another example. My kids go to a school, a small Catholic high school, where we have 0 facilities. There's a gym attached to the school, which we love because it's a shoebox of a gym and everybody's right down on top of you. And it's a heck of a home court advantage, but I will guarantee you there's not a team around that ever wants to come and play in our gym. We don't have our own football field. We lease a field that doesn't even get used anymore by the public school system that was a middle school field. So to be honest, I'm trying to think of a nice way to describe it. It's not a nice field. There's not a great PA system. It's certainly not turf. It's yuck. And again, no one wants to play there, but we've played there for a million years. It's our field. It's our piece of garbage. We love it, So we don't have that. We don't have a pool. We don't have our own baseball field. We literally do not have an athletic facility around. Where they managed to put together championship programs. Our football program won the state championship in 2019. Actually, my oldest son was a senior that year. And after they won the state championship, I kept waiting thinking, okay, there's been all of this talk about building a stadium and we had property. So I kept thinking, all right, somebody's going to call or somebody's going to email. We just won a state championship. Let's start asking for money. And nobody called and nobody emailed. And here we are now 4 years later, and they're starting to talk about maybe fundraising for this new football stadium that we've had the property for years. And so I just had this conversation with somebody. I said, why now? And they said, well, we've got to do something. We need to do it now. And I said, but why not 4 years ago? And they said, what do you mean? I said, you were riding the wave of a state championship for a school where, literally everybody's on it. We have 339 students this year enrolled, and we go up to Ford Field where the Lions play for the state championship. And we had 4 times as many fans at that stadium as anybody else that we played. It's just, there's a lot of tradition. And so my response was, you're 4 years too late. This is something that you really have to leverage all the variables in your favor when you're talking about fundraising. So take advantage of timing as much as you can. And again, people, who do you have at your disposal that can help you do some of these asks? Who are the folks that maybe have already donated their time and money and are involved and know why the need is there? So don't go at it alone, I guess, is really, at the end of the day, ask for help and don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it is a fundraiser where you need to raise $2,000, or again, whether you're building a stadium. You need your stakeholders on board, and you need everybody passionate and invested in what it is you're hoping to accomplish. Because, if we're not all driving the train the same way, then it's not going to get to the destination. So.
Boy, you probably saw me furiously scribbling down notes there. Everything you just said, just tremendously valuable information for an AD or a coach. Generally, we wait for our next segment, but I'm going to do this now, and then we'll do it at the end of the podcast. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit, whether it was, just connecting on Twitter or just email you as a professional in this area, what's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Oh gosh. Twitter is always good. I'm on Twitter all the time. So my messaging is open. So that's always a good option. It's just Molly Mo, MO32, I think is what it is. Molly Mo 32. That's probably the best option. I'm not really great at always checking my email, or I can be found through the Oakland University website too. It's oakland.edu through the advancement division. And through the staff pages there.
Right. Well, again, we're going to take another break. Our guest is Molly Moore, longtime college coach, college administrator, and now the director of donor relations at Oakland University. And as you just heard, a pro at fundraising and development. We'll take that break. And when we come back, Molly's going to share some best practices from her perspective as a leader, as a coach, as an administrator. So stay with us. We're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support of the podcast. Go to hometownticketing.com. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. And if you go to Hometown Ticketing, they're going to show you how to set up and sell tickets online for all your events, not just athletic events, but things like school plays, concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every step of the way, Hometown is going to provide you with a dedicated client success manager to give you hands-on support every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges, and Hometown offers more support, more security, more customization. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com and start creating world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. It's so easy, even I can do it. We use Gipper to promote the podcast, and schools all across the country use Gipper, both high schools and colleges, to help celebrate their programs, promote their teams, and let their athletes know where to go. Go to Gipper.com. It's trusted by over 3,000 college and high school programs. Start creating world-class content for your school's social media channel. That's Gipper.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Molly, one of the things that we try to do with the podcast is this idea of sharing best practices. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. What are some things that you have seen, maybe even you've done, as a coach, as an athletic director, or in your present position, that you would consider best practices that you can share with our listeners now?
This is easy for me, the first one anyway. I think communication is key, regardless of what we're talking about, what career path. The bulk of problems that I see even now, and I do a lot of work in teams throughout the university, most of it can always be headed off with clear communication and being transparent. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day that, we were talking about something relative to bad news being delivered. And at the end of the day, I said, if only we would have been able to have a conversation about why this decision was made, then we would have a better understanding and maybe be more accepting of it instead of just, something being announced to us. So I think it's really important to be able to have good conversation with the people that are involved in decision-making in particular. I think it's important to be really flexible, particularly as a coach and AD and as a spring sport coach. Who's more flexible than that? You're moving venues and game days and times and whatever at a moment's notice. So that's really got to be kind of a mainstay personality wise, is that, you can operate on the fly and under really kind of crazy conditions from time to time. Again, I think for human beings in general, the ability to admit, a mistake or that maybe a decision that you made wasn't the best one is, for me, a really strong quality in a person. It demonstrates that, that they're confident in being able to say, I screwed up this time and this wasn't the best thing. And stay away from making excuses and passing the buck and all of that stuff. To me, that's just an indicator of weakness of being and lack of integrity. And I think, again, the people around you need to know that their leader, whether it be a coach or an athletic director, or again, in any other career path, their leader is somebody that's willing to own and be responsible for their stuff, even in the moments when it's uncomfortable because maybe there was a failure or a lack of judgment involved. I think being enthusiastic and approaching each day with an enthusiasm is always contagious. And we all have days that we dread, not just getting out of bed, but getting out the door and going to work because you know what lays ahead. And then there's some days you don't know what lays ahead. And really your outlook and how you approach that, it spreads to the folks around. And again, when we're working in team settings and dealing with people on a regular basis, I always come back to that quote, and I can't remember who said it, but about approaching things with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind or whatever. And I come back to that from time to time, because I think even in like our worst moments, like if I'm dealing with the worst thing that happens in a day, man, I'm going to deal with it with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And if you can smile through the bad stuff and really, you know, remember that people are cueing into how you deal with things, I think we're all apt to be more successful in those settings. And then lastly, personally, you know, I start my day thinking, today I want to learn one thing new at least, and I want to make a difference, no matter how small, in the life or lives of the people around me. If I can, at the end of the day, reflect on those and say, yes, I learned something new, and maybe it was something dumb. Maybe I learned how to spell a word that I didn't know how to spell before, whatever. And maybe the difference I made was that somebody came in and literally just needed to sit down and take a breather, and I told her a joke, whatever. I feel like even again on those monotonous days and the challenging days, being able to be mindful of those two things helps really keep me grounded and present and intentional about how I do things during the day. And so that would be my fifth and final recommendation, is just, you know, always set out with those kind of goals in mind. And at the end of the day, if you can reflect and say, yeah, you know, I met those, then despite anything else that might not have happened that day, it's still been a good day.
Boy, really good stuff. I love them all, but I love the one about enthusiasm. It wasn't your quote, but I think it was maybe it was Eleanor Roosevelt that is attributed with saying nothing great was ever accomplished without great enthusiasm. And that's what I would share with our coaches. I said, I don't care if you coach loud or coach quiet, but I want to see your enthusiasm. I want the kids to see that you're fired up and, you know, you love what you're doing. You know, very cool stuff. Okay. Almost, we could take all 5 of those and put them in the toolbox, but we're going to save the toolbox segment for the end. For listeners, our guest today, once again, is Molly Moore, a longtime college coach, college athletic director, and now the director of donor relations at Oakland University, which is in the Detroit area. We're going to take another break. I know that's shocking to our regular listeners, but we're coming back with more. Please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank our good friends at Home Campus for their support of the podcast. Home Campus is the exclusive high school information management and state association platform for the Educational AD Podcast. It's also your one-stop platform for things like schedules, athletic clearance and eligibility, coaching clearance, and a whole lot more. As an athletic director, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just great. And the Home Campus team was great to work with too. To find out how you can get started with Home Campus, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. Check them out today. We also want to say thank you to our good friends at Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you as an athletic director do your job better. If you're looking for a fundraising platform, stop right here. SnapRaise is hands down the best one out there. We used it at my school with great success. They even have a program where they're going to give you your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. Nobody else does that. But you also have Snap Connect, Snap Store, Snap Manage, and a whole lot more. You'll find them all at snapraise.com. That's snapraise.com. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Molly, you've been involved in a lot of different activities, I guess, for lack of a better word. And one of them is a program called Galvanize that, as I was reading about it, I was just really intrigued. Can you share with our listeners what it is and why they should care about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had mentioned, I think way back when we were first talking today, I left my college coaching job in part because I was working on a family, and it was the right thing to do for my family. And, you know, we all get to a point in our life that we make choices based on our family that maybe aren't, you know, our first choice individually, but it's what you do. You make sacrifices for the betterment of the people that you love. And so since that time, I've never really refound my footing directly in athletics, you know, coaching here and there, but it was never my full-time gig after that. And I've missed it dearly. And so, you know, the other part of getting older is you hit milestones. And a couple of years ago, when I turned 50, I started thinking about, okay, what do I want to do for the next 50 years? And so I thought a lot about the career path that I was on at that point. And I weigh things when it comes to work, I weigh them on a sliding scale. It either has to make me ridiculously happy or a ridiculous amount of money. And if I can, you know, if one of those things is true in some capacity, then I'm good. And at the point where neither one of those things is true, maybe it's time to start searching for my passion. And so that's really the crossroads I found myself at a couple of years ago. And so I started just, you know, kind of chewing on how was I going to work back into this athletics thing, because I'm kind of a has-been, and, you know, nobody's looking to hire a 50-year-old woman who used to be a coach and used to do this, you know. So anyway, not to belabor the point, but there was a story, and forgive me, I can't remember who the athlete was, but it was about a professional football player who, unfortunately, there was a tragic accident and he was hit by a car or something. And when the story broke, the reporter that was breaking the news interjected into this story about this untimely death, the really not positive statistics of this athlete's professional career. And that's kind of what he led with when telling that this person had passed away. And as a result, you know, it left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of people as they were voicing their feedback on Twitter, which is where I had read it. And it led me to Laura Oakman, who is one of the longest tenured NFL sideline reporters. And she had the opportunity to interview this athlete like a year prior to his passing. And she was one of the people that was not happy with how the news of his death was revealed. And so she sort of answered with this story of her own and said, this is what you need to know about this person. This is the good that he did in his life. So take the fact that he really didn't have the NFL career that people hoped he would or whatever out of it. That's not who he was. Who he was this person that did all of this for charity and so on and so forth. And I was so touched by how she presented this individual's story that it led me to her website. And I started reading more about her because I really didn't know a lot about her, and found that she had started this effort called Galvanize. Sorry for the long response as to what it is. But so I started reading about Galvanize and found that they were doing these boot camps. And the more I read, the more I was intrigued. And I reached out to her and said, I really want to support this in some way. I thought it was a foundation and I wanted to support it, you know, by financially or whatever. And she said, well, that's not really what it is. What it is like a mentoring program for young women in college, out of college, seeking careers in the sports world. She said, I came through where there was no support for women who are trying to break into the sports world, particularly this professional arena. And I don't want the next generation of women to endure the things I did. So I started Galvanize, and it's a mentoring program and a networking program. And she said, oh, by the way, we have boot camps coming up soon, and I need you to come to one. That is so far out of my comfort zone. I don't like forced interaction. I don't like conferences. That's not my thing. I like organic connections and things happening naturally. But then I stopped and I said, you know, for 2 years, I've been wrestling with why am I stuck in doing what I'm doing? And it dawned on me because I haven't pushed myself out of my comfort zone. So lo and behold, I packed up and I flew down to Jacksonville and took part in this boot camp, and have forever been, you know, worshiping Laura since then. It was life-changing. It was awesome. So at the end of the day, what Galvanize is it is an effort that she started, like I said, to help initially younger women get into sports careers, but it's grown so that it's not just women in sports. It is still pretty heavy in that regard, but anybody is welcome. And it's not, obviously not just younger women. But Laura and I are the same age. And that was a lot of our conversation was about, what do you do when you're in my position? And so there was a group of us that were sort of all at the same place in life that connected and have remained connected with the Galvanize effort. So the boot camps are partnerships with NFL teams. We do work with the rookies during rookie camp and sort of help them with a little media training. And it all sort of comes back to what brought me to Laura in the first place, is that when you're interacting with people, whether it's as a job, as a reporter, or in life in general, or in other careers, we need to be more cognizant about who the people are, what's their story, and what are they about, and not what do they do. Don't ever lead a conversation when you walk in a room. Don't ask somebody, what do you do? That's not who they are. And that's, at the end of the day, that's really what the focus of Galvanize is, in addition to the practical mentoring and providing these opportunities for women in sports to find careers. That's what it does. But what it's about is making real connections in whatever you do. And so my biggest takeaway and what I use on a regular basis, and again, so much of what we do, AD, donor relations, communications, all of it is all about relationship building and connecting. My takeaway is to make those genuine connections, we need to really talk to people and find out who they are and what they need and what fuels their passion. Because for so many of us, what we do isn't the same thing. What we do is what puts bread on the table for our family, or whatever, but it's not the person that we are. And that's what it's about. So she continues to do boot camps. She did a big workshop this past year. Like I said, it's grown so substantially, but I would recommend it. She has a website. I would recommend for any young women seeking careers in sports broadcasting, sideline reporting, even, the behind the scenes stuff, the video production and social media. It's just a phenomenal network. Laura is a tremendous human being. It's a really great way to make meaningful connections and kind of get a leg up in the industry.
Well, what a great program. And it was so cool that it was great for you, in your career, at this point in your career, still much, much younger than me, but also for young up and comers too. Can you give out the website? How do our listeners find out more?
Sure. So Galvanize is linked through Laura's website. So it's lauraoakman.com. And her last name is spelled Okmin. And once you get there, you can navigate right to the Galvanize page. But I suggest going right to lauraoakman.com so you can read about her and the great things that she does, notwithstanding the Galvanize stuff, a lot of other stuff that she does. There's also a really robust social media presence for Galvanize on both Twitter and Instagram. And both of them, the handle is Galvanize Life. So if you put in Galvanize, it'll bring you to something totally different. So you have to make sure it's Galvanize Life, both on Twitter and on Instagram. And that's the best way to stay connected. Again, for anybody that's interested potentially in upcoming programming, stay in tune with the social media because everything gets posted through there. But I also will caution that there's not a whole lot that goes on until football season's over, because if you turn your TVs on, you'll see her on the Fox sideline for a lot of the games. And so most of the programming happens in the NFL off season, even though there's still social media stuff going on. The on-site things are generally during the summer.
Okay. So. Well, and, with football season officially starting last night, with the Jets and the Browns, I guess we're there, but Galvanize Life, at Galvanize Life, Twitter and Instagram. Check it out. Sounds like a tremendously valuable experience, for anyone. For listeners, we are visiting today with Molly Moore. We're going to take another break, but we're not done. So please come back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support of the podcast. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com and check out their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, your school's Hall of Fame, or it just lets you tell more compelling stories about your school's diverse history, your proudest moments, and your top role models. Go to their website, vitalsignswalloffame.com. When you're ready to order, mention the podcast. You'll get a nice discount. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We want to say thank you to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo and see their indoor score tables and scoreboards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. We use it for games, of course, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. sidelineinteractive.com. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational 80 podcast. Molly, you and I were talking, and, again, one of the things we try to share on the podcast is this idea of best practices. And we are still, very close to the 50th anniversary of celebrating Title IX. And in your career, you've got a Title IX experience to share, as I'm probably sure most women do. But can you go ahead and share that with our listeners? Because I think it's an important message that needs to be heard.
Certainly. And I think the biggest thing and the takeaway that I want everybody to have is that at the end of the day, we all have an obligation to do what's right for our athletes, both males and females. And that's really what this story is about. As a young coach a long time ago, I found, and AD, I found myself in a position where, I'm recruiting athletes into a program and knowing that I wasn't going to have enough uniforms for all of them. And I wasn't going to have an increase in budget to support the numbers that I was told that I had to recruit. And our facilities weren't going to get better. And so I was pouring all of this effort into a program and really trying to sell it to the female athletes that I wanted to come and compete for me, knowing that they weren't going to get the best from the university that I was recruiting them to. And as newer coaches were hired and new programs were added, the other female coaches and women's sports coaches were starting to recognize that this was a trend in a lot of the programs. And so long story short, we got to a point where I tried to have dialogue with the individuals that were in charge at the time, who are no longer there. And I said, communication is key. And so I tried to have these conversations, and when we would build facilities and I would recognize that there were things that weren't necessarily Title IX compliant, I would try to educate, because it's easier, I think, to dismiss certain things if you believe that the people making the decisions are just ignorant. And I don't say that disrespectfully, but truthfully, like if they really just don't know the law and whatever. And so I sort of looked at it as my task to help them understand what their obligations were relative to the female athletes in those sports programs. And there comes a time, unfortunately, and for some people, and it was true for me, where I realized that it wasn't a matter of inequities existing because of ignorance, that it was willful. And no matter how much we talked, the decisions weren't going to change because they knew the law and chose to disregard it anyway. And so I was in a position where I had to figure out, okay, do I continue to just motor forward and pretend I don't know this is happening and let my athletes get lesser this and lesser that, and the other women's coaches be treated lesser this and lesser that? Or do I do the right thing, even though it might be ridiculously uncomfortable for me personally? And so I ended up contacting the Office of Civil Rights, and again, 10 years into my tenure there, and filed a complaint when I felt like every other avenue I had to do it through the school was exhausted. And they were eventually forced to remedy 10 of the 11 things that I had indicated were issues in my complaint. The OCR agreed with me. At the time, I was told that it was the most egregious violation of Title IX they had ever investigated. And so a lot of things changed. So the good thing is, I think things were better. I don't know now if however many years later it is, if things are still way better for the women athletes, but immediately they were, because things had to happen and things had to change. And the women's coaches and all of those women's programs were finally on sort of an even playing field with the men athletes. But the other thing that's really important for me for people to understand is that anytime Title IX comes up for discussion, I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh, you're trying to take something away from the men, or you don't want them to have it. And that's never the case, I assure you. And it was never the case in my circumstance. I always maintained great relationships and supported every one of those other coaches and the men's programs. And I would never want anything taken away from them, because let's be honest, particularly at a Division III institution, ain't nobody out there getting any frills. We're driving rusty old 15-passenger vans and in a locker room where, the water may or may not come out of the shower head. Things are better now, but at the time, so I never suggested, nor did I ever want anything taken away from the men. It was really all about making it right for the women. And so I think things are better now. It's sort of an uncomfortable story for me to share, because again, the initial feeling, I think, for a lot of people is to look at somebody who is willing to put their neck on the line like that and call them a troublemaker, or they were disgruntled, or they're just trying to stir the pot and this and that. But at the end of the day, I had to go home and look in the mirror and know that I had an opportunity to do something right. It came at great personal expense to me, because I lost friends over it. It got very tough in that environment, which was another piece I had mentioned. Part of why I transitioned away from that job was because I had a family, but this is the second part of it. And so it came at great personal expense, but I will tell you, if I had to do it again, I would do it again, because it's what we need to do to continue to work towards equal opportunities for everybody. And I think, some people like to say, it's just sports. What's the big deal? It's not just sports. And if you have kids that are involved, and if you make a career at it, you understand the significant value that comes with sports participation, the confidence building, the team building, again, the communication, all of that. It all comes from sport participation. And that's why we provide opportunities for boys and girls and different socioeconomic backgrounds and races and, everything under the sun. We want everybody to have that opportunity because we recognize the value in it. And so when the experience is lesser than for some of the people, and we allow that to happen knowingly, we're not doing our jobs, and we're not frankly just doing what's right. And so moving forward, I would just say, we're 51 years removed from Title IX being enacted. Things, I understand, are way better 51 years later. But I think we still have a long way to go. And so I would just encourage everybody, new coach, old coach, male, female, whatever sport you represent, to be cognizant of what is in the best interest of all of our athletes, males and females. Have conversations, try to educate yourself and educate the people that are around you, and frankly, do the right thing. Know that when you go home at night, those athletes that are taking the field for you are getting your best and getting the best that the institution that they are representing has to offer. And if they aren't, and you have the ability to make a change, you need to do that. You have an obligation to do that for those athletes.
Yeah, you mentioned it a couple of times. You don't comply with Title IX because you're afraid of a visit from the OCR. You do it because it's the right thing. It's the right thing for the women athletes. It's the right thing for the men. It's the right thing to do. Really appreciate you sharing that. Molly, this has just been really cool. Spending some time with you. I wish we had some more time, but we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're no longer an AD, but you were a college AD, and you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. So we're going to take our final break. We're going to hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor the AD Toolbox segment. When we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in the toolbox. So let's take that final break. And when we return, we're going to find out what Molly Moore is going to put in her new athletic director toolbox. We want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys for their support of the podcast. If you are not doing a survey of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing the boat. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey for you and your athletic department that lets you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. ADs already hear back from the complainers, the 2% that want to gripe about everything. Athletic Surveys not only connects you with the 2%, but they also connect you with the 98% that love and support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with that frustrated parent or your principal or your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create that survey for you and your program. Let you take your program from good to great. That's athleticsurveys.com. Check them out today. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We have been visiting today with Molly Moore. She's a longtime college coach, college athletic director. She's currently the director of donor relations for Oakland University in the Detroit area. Certainly knows her way around the world of athletics. But right now I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let her put 3 things in that toolbox. So Molly Moore, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
Well, the first thing would be I would coach them to not be afraid to ask questions. Nothing worse than trying to fake your way through something that you don't know. There's no shame in not knowing something. And no matter how many years, even if you've been an athletic director, if you find yourself at a new institution, there's always going to be nuances associated with that. So ask questions and get clarification so you know what it is you're up against. I think this is a no-brainer. You have to make organization a priority. You're juggling multiple teams and schedules and officials and again, things on the fly that change based on the season. So organization is key. I mean, there's no way around it. A lot of mistakes happen, I think, when organization's not a top priority. So that's my second. And the third, and to me, probably the most important one, and again, it comes back to the whole relationship building thing, is get to know the people that you are working with and working for, and get to know what makes them tick. So sit down with your custodial staff, your facilities staff, your coaches, your other support staff, have a coffee, grab a sandwich, and really don't waste time in getting to know those folks and understanding, what makes them tick and what they need from you in order to do their job successfully, and talk about how you guys can partner to eliminate any surprises and issues down the road. And I think, again, you cultivate the relationships that really make your job easier, and recognize the value in everybody's role, and that there's nobody more important than anybody else, and make sure that they all know that you value what they bring to the table. I think it makes life easier for everybody involved then.
Yeah. You mentioned organization being a no-brainer. I think all of these are no-brainers. You want to have that inquiring mind. I think that was probably, we mentioned a long time ago, you don't know what you don't know. I wish I would have been more comfortable as a young coach, as a young AD, in reaching out to others and asking those questions, because it is so very valuable, not only from a knowledge-based standpoint, but to add to your network. And then, you mentioned the support people, building those relationships, whether it's your coach, your principal, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, all those people that go into the life of a school. Molly, again, this has just been tremendous getting to know you. If one of our listeners wants to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, what's the best way that they can connect with you?
Probably through Twitter messaging. And it's Molly Mo, again, MOLLYMO32 is my Twitter handle. And I share lots of opinions too. So, but yeah, I think that's probably the best way to reach me regularly. So yeah.
Yeah. And I already mentioned that Molly's got a very strong Twitter game. It's actually how we first connected. So reach out, Molly Mo 32. And let's not forget Galvanize Life. Check that out. Add that to your network. Molly Moore, thanks so much for sharing with our listeners, and all the best for you at Oakland University in the coming school year.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
For listeners, we appreciate you listening, and we upload our Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Come back next week for more great interviews, and just about every day for new content on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.